And I'm joined now by Godfrey Maumela, Executive Manager of Bulk Water Distribution at Rand Water. Thank you so much for your time this evening. This dramatic footage that we've just played, I wonder if you could talk us through that as a starting point. I know there's so much else to talk about, but it looks like a lot of water was wasted in that. Was that a maintenance issue? Was it a vandalism issue? Where did it happen? How did it happen? And has it been fixed now?
All right. Thank you very much, and good evening to you, Sally, and the viewers. Let me maybe just start with the footage that you just showed right now. That footage is actually an air valve of one of our pipelines that failed yesterday, just a little outside of Nigerena. And the failure was as a result of us, when we were recommissioning the pipeline that we had actually taken out of commission over the weekend, as you rightfully indicated. Now, obviously, because our pipelines are quite large diameter pipelines, and these pipelines are under severe amount of pressure as a result of water being pumped through our eNCA pump station. Whenever you have a failure, you would be able to see that kind of amount of water that basically will actually be coming from that particular leak. So that is basically what had happened. But I am happy to report here that we have been able to fix that leak overnight, and we have actually been able to start up our pump station, and we are currently supplying water, although I must mention that the reservoirs are still at very, very critical levels at this point in time.
Yes, and we are still getting reports that a number of suburbs are actually still without water. Do you have a sense of how many suburbs across Johannesburg and Soweto, Joburg, are actually still without water? Because you listed over 100 suburbs in your press release saying, look, these are the areas that could be affected. So how many are affected? Are you even able to assess at this point?
Yes. We are in constant discussion with our colleagues at Johannesburg Water, who obviously keep updating us in terms of the areas that remain affected. Now, obviously, as we continue to pump water, and we slowly fill our reservoirs, areas that are affected do actually improve. Some areas who haven't had water this afternoon could be having water this evening. And just the conversation I had earlier is that we're expecting that most of the suburbs that are affected are going to or should have water, or at least have low pressure tomorrow morning, because the water usage at night obviously is less, so we're able to have a bit of a better speedy recovery overnight. I know Joburg Water has put in their Twitter account and all their social media all the specific areas that have been affected. And I would actually advise that residents can actually also check their status there.
Of particular concern in your media release earlier today was 10 hospitals that could also be at risk. What has happened to those hospitals during the course of today? Have they been severely affected?
What happens is that whenever we have an unforeseen incident like this, whether, of course, it's planned or unplanned, what our clients would do, which is Johannesburg Water in particular, in this regard, would obviously make sure that there are alternative means of supplying, especially critical areas like hospitals and old age homes and schools and all those kind of places, by means of strategically placing water tankers at places where, they can be able to have people go and get water. So I would want to believe that as part, of course, of the contingency plans that are put in place, that is exactly what has been done throughout today. I must also stress that although the media release that was sent out shows so many of those suburbs, it's not all of them that currently do not have water. Because as we indicated, we are actually at very critically low reservoir levels. But I must also stress that before the Johannesburg water reservoirs actually run empty, it would have actually meant first and foremost that Rand Water's ones would run empty. So some areas within Johannesburg Water would still have water as a result of the supply from their reservoirs.
I want to go back to the beginning because residents in many areas were informed around Johannesburg late last week that there would be quite an extensive potential shut-off of water because there was critical maintenance that Rand Water needed to conduct, and it involved valves and bivalves. That's all I remember. But what we heard on Sunday, because our water was not cut off, what we heard on Sunday was that the technicians had been unable able to isolate the area they needed to work and get the water out of it to clearly work there. So that operation had not gone ahead. Has that original problem now been fixed? Have you been able to fix it, or do you still need to sort out the valve and the bivalve problem that you were hoping to sort out over this past weekend?
We still need to plan another shutdown in order to go and replace that particular main valve as well as the bypass valve. But I think it's important also to just stress that although it hasn't been fixed as yet, it does not pose any specific risk to the supply of water. That particular valve is one that we use to connect two pipelines for flexibility purposes. So in operations, when you isolate one, you should be able to work on another. But we will need to still do that work, and in due time, we will be communicating when we are ready to do so.
So the dramatic footage that we showed our viewers earlier that happened at Naturena yesterday, that you were able to stop overnight, was that as a result of trying to work with the system? Or could that be a case of vandalism? Could that be a case of just an infrastructure fail, or linked to the attempted work this past weekend?
This is really infrastructure failure. You see, when we isolate pipelines, we have air valves that obviously would also be part of the isolation. But when we recommission those lines, those air valves are actually used to get all the trapped air in the pipeline out. You possibly would realize if you open your water after a shutdown, you get some bit of air coming out of the tap. So those air valves do exactly that. Now, unfortunately, when we were recommissioning, that particular air valve actually failed. And as a result, water was coming from that particular air valve, which we have subsequently repaired.
Well, thank you very much for the update. Godfrey Maumela, Executive Manager of Bulk Water Distribution at Rand Water. There has been patchy water supply across many suburbs of Johannesburg and Soweto this week. A failed operation to fix a bivalve and a valve over the weekend, and then that air valve fault and that dramatic footage, of course, has not helped matters. But we are getting an assurance now that all water should be restored by tomorrow morning.